Perek Lamed Ches. Now I have to tell you something. The way the Alter Rebbe divides up these prokim is very, very strange, and I'll tell you why. Because prokim Lamed Heilam Vav Lamed Zayin talk about Dirib Tachtenim, right? Asiyah, the mile of action, the Birat Nefesh Bahamas, and the Guf Chalki Beilam. And then at the end of Perek Lamed Zayin, on page Memtes Amar Aleph, he went back to talk about Teda, right? He begins Perek Lamed Ches, weiter with mitzvahs. V'hinei, im kol anal, based on everything we learned before, about even though Teda is made in the Kamilas, but there's still a big mile of mitzvahs over Teda in terms of birurim and ayem la'aseisa. Yuven heite, we can explain well, psaka halacha, ha'arucha b'talmudu paskim, the psak din which is brought in the Shas, it's not enough to think and you have to speak words, which is exactly how the Alter Rebbe started Perek Lamed Zayin. On page Numem Zayin Amar Aleph, he brings the same Hira Lav Kediba Dami. Why the Alter Rebbe repeats it? Beats me. And therefore, if you read Shema in your thought and in your heart, Levad alone, even if it's a Cholkech Kavanas with all the Kavan of the world, you're not into the Chiyuv. You have to read it again. Same is true of benching, which is a deraisa. And even no b'shar brachas derabanan no b'tefillah, and even a brachas and tefillah which are derabanan, the chiyuv is chayim. You have to say it with your lips. If on the other hand you said it with your lips, v'laikiv and liban, there was a deficiency in kavana. Of course, minus the first pasuk of Krishma, which you have to have kavana. The din is Yossi yedeicha v'asi b'diavad yates. You don't have to repeat it because the bottom line is you said the words, and that's called being makayim the mitzvah. Besides the first pasuk of Krishma, and the first bracha of Shmeinah Esrei. And I think it means the first three brachas of Shmeinah Esrei. The brachas, the Gemara says in the beginning, the mitzvah of kavana is the first pasuk of Krishma, and the first the Perek Beis, the brachas is about Krishma. And afterwards you have to just read the words. And there, what do we see from this? That the ikir is ayin from asiyah, and by mitzvahs of dibur, the asiyah is dibur. The reason the neshama itself needs no corrections at all, the mitzvahs and doing mitzvahs. If the neshama, if the moyach, if the pnimis of a person needed a correction and there was deficiency in kavana, you have to say it again, and the koch would be more in the kavanah. But since the neshama needs no correction, and the only reason to do mitzvahs is to bring down light l'sakin nefesh achayunas v'aguf, to correct the animal soul and the body. This is idea but it's only when you speak, because when you think, it's only the nefesh l'kis alone. When you speak, since akimas vasav have a maise, the animal soul and the guf are also involved in that speech. The animal soul and the body are speaking using the five mitzvah source of speech, and of course much more so in mitzvahs maises, which the body does the rest of the limbs of the body. So the Alter Rebbe starts off Perek Lamed Ches by going back to the Maila of Asiyah and Birurim, bringing him on to go for Nefesh Bahamas and to Chalki Beilam and so forth, even though he went back to Teda. Now, Ad Kan Dira B'Tachtenim, the B'Tachtenim is now over. Now the Rebbe is going to go back to Kavanah. But I want to make something clear, the way I understand it, of course. The first 34 parakim of Tanya talked about what we want out of Yiddishkeit. What do we want out of Yiddishkeit? We want to get close to the Eibishter. The Lashon Perek Lamed Beis is the Ketachas the Yirdis Lamata is like Biyah v'Lahalas and Nefesh Alaguf Maila at Ikir v'Shasha the Kolam. The point is to lift the neshama, which is Bikir Tutei. Perek Lamed Heilam Vav Lamed Zayin, and the beginning of this Perek are focusing Kvayachim what the Eibishter wants, and that is Laham Shachayin Tzei B'Knesses Yisrael, to bring godliness down. Alter Rebbe adds, even though the Eibishter wants Asiyah, because it's Mevar the Guf and Nefesh Bahamas, the Eibishter wants Kavanah. And it seems to me that the Kavanah we're going to be learning about now is not doing a Kavanah because it brings you closer to the Eibishter. Doing a Kavanah because the Eibishter has a Ratzon. You have this Lashon, an Amud Beis. I want to show you these words. On Amud Beis, the Rebbe says the Lashon, 5 lines from the bottom of the page, on page 100, here now, he's speaking about Ian of Kavana. Chachafilu, the whole focus until now was on Maiseh and action and the Yisrael of Aseh. Now, he's going to go back to Kavana, but not Kavana, it brings you closer to the Eibishter. Kavana, because the Eibishter wants that the mitzvahs should have lichtigkeit. And the lichtigkeit of the behavior of mitzvahs and the birurim of the guf of the nefesh of Bahamas and Chalki Be'elam involves Kavana. So we go now to the text. Ach afa pikeinom. Nevertheless, the halacha is, even though we just place such priority on Bidur of Nefesh Bahamas and the Guf and Chalke Be'elam, at the same time, Amr doesn't halacha, Tefillah, Shar B'racha, Tefillah or any other B'racha. B'lei Kavon, if there's no Kavon, and of course the same is true also of mitzvahs of Asiyah, and not just mitzvahs of Dibur, Hen Keguf, B'lei Neshama, it's like having a body without a soul. Peter just means to say, Kikimei Shekala B'ruim Shebe'elam Hazeh, every physical creation, Sheyesh Lam Guf and Neshama, they have a body and a soul. Right? Shem nefesh kol chai, veruach kol psarish, venishmas kol asher ruach chayim b'yapav. He mentions nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Right? By nefesh, he says the lashon nefesh kol, the soul of all living things. Veruach kol psarish, and the spirit of the flesh of every man. Here he speaks already about ish. Venishmas kol asher ruach chayim b'yapav. And the soul, which is in the spirit, the wind of Hashem, which is the nostrils of all living things. So he mentions nefesh, ruach, and neshama. By nefesh he says chai, by ruach he says ish, and by neshama he says kol asher ruach chayim b'yapav. Hashem gives life to everything. From a state of non-existence, ish to state of existence, tamid constantly, be'ed with life, which is save of kalam, and v'chayis, and life, which is mamala kalam. Shemashpia b'hem, which Hashem is flowing into them. Says the Rebbe, not all living things, they're physical, they exist, and they're alive. Even a physical base body. Even stones and earth, which has no life, mamish. Many yisbarach has light and life from the Eibishter. It should not revert back into being. Nothing, in a state of nothingness, in absolute nothingness as it was. Everything has a neshama. This idea that a stone has a neshama is repeated again in Shara Yichad Perek Aleph from Kisvei Arizal. Everything has a neshama. So a person has a neshama, an animal has a neshama, a plant has a neshama. Neshama is neshama, ruach is neshama, nefesh is neshama. A stone has a neshama. Nevertheless, everybody understands that you cannot measure and compare whatsoever the light and life of the Eibishter, which gives chayis to the body itself, in other words, to the bones and the flesh and the blood. To the amount of light and life that's in the neshama, which is the soul of all living things. In other words, you have a guf and you have a neshama. Your guf without a neshama also has a neshama. But the neshama of your guf alone is much, much more concealed than the neshama of the neshama. So the Alter Rebbe's point is, everything has a soul, has living things. But in higher levels, you see the life on a much, much, much greater and more revealed way. So Chachafilu, we place so much emphasis on Asiyah, right? Everything is action. So it's to listen. Mitzvah, b'lei kavana, tefillah, shabrach, b'lei kavana, you neshama. You have to the mitzvah, and you're doing the birurim, you're fixing your nefesh Bahamas, you're fixing your gush, it's missing kavana, and kavana is also Ratzon Ha'elyon. Right? Now,